In Chapter 9, we will discuss cookies and sessions. In this chapter, you will learn how to maintain state to remember information from page to page. On the web, one page request is completely separate from another page request. By default, information from one page is not remembered or available to the next page. This is called stateless. The state of one page is not known to the next page. In other words, the information on one page is not available to the next page. There are times when online applications need to track information from page to page. For example, online shopping and online banking. In PHP, we can use cookies and sessions to make information available from page to page. What are cookies? A cookie is information that is stored in the web browser. Your web browser might be Firefox or Chrome or Safari. All web browsers include a feature for storing cookies. A cookie has a name and a value and contains any information that your application needs to keep between page requests. For example, it could contain the visitor's username, or it could contain the visitor's shopping cart items. When the page is submitted, the cookies are sent to the web server as part of the request. Your PHP code can access the cookies from the request. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for additional information about PHP cookies. The way it works is, the user submits a request for a web page from their web browser. For our purposes, this is a PHP script page that you write, such as index.php. The PHP script creates the cookies and the web page content and sends it back to the browser as part of the response. The next time the user submits a request, the cookies are included and the PHP code can read the cookies. This is important to remember. The cookies do not exist in the first request. The PHP code creates them and sends them back to the browser in the response. Then, each subsequent request contains the cookies. Creating cookies. One thing to remember is that cookies must be created prior to any other information. This is related to the output buffering topic that we discussed in the previous chapter. You will receive the headers already sent error if any information is sent prior to creating the cookies. Use the setCookie function to create cookies. It sets the cookie's name and value. The first two parameters for the setCookie function are the name of the cookie and the value of the cookie. The name and value can be set using either literal strings or variables. For example, look at the code on the slide. These use literal strings for the names and values, but could have just as easily used variables. The first one creates a cookie with the name cookie name and the value of this is the cookie value. The next one creates a cookie with the name of name2 and the value of some value. The last one creates a cookie with the name of name3 and a value of another value. Remember that these are just examples. In reality, the cookie can be anything that your code needs to remember. So you might have a cookie with a name of student ID and a value of a student's ID. Or you might have a cookie with a name of username and the value of a visitor's username. Also remember that setCookie function runs in the PHP code on the web server. The cookies will be created in the web browser when the PHP code sends the request. By the way, cookies are meant to store small amounts of information. And even though the limits have increased over time, you should keep the number of cookies to a minimum. You can find additional examples at the link at the bottom of the slide. To send cookies. The example code is taken from the customize.php file script 9.1. It creates two cookies to store the user's choices for the font size and font color. First, look at the form image on the slide. You see two fields, one for the font size and one for the font color. If you look at the code for the form, you see that the name of the font size field is font size and the name of the font color field is font color. When the form is submitted, the values chosen in the font size and font color fields will be stored in the post array. You should recognize this since this is the way we learned to handle form values. Now look at the set cookie code on the slide. Two cookies are being created. The first has a name of font_size and the value of the font size from the post array that was selected on the form. The second has a name of font_color and the value of the font color from the post array that was selected on the form. This code will create two cookies in the web browser, one for the font size and one for the font color. Later we'll learn how to read the values of the cookies. Remember that the cookies must be sent before anything else is sent to the browser. To accomplish this, the script starts by creating the cookies before doing anything else. Reading from cookies. In PHP, cookies are stored in an array called $_cookie. This is an associative array similar to the get and post arrays. The index of each element in the array is the name of the cookie. So, for example, we set a cookie with the name of user and the value of trout. To access the value for this cookie in the cookie array, use the cookie name like $_cookie, open square bracket, user, close square bracket. Now the cookie named user is available to all pages on the website. Remember that the cookie doesn't exist until the PHP code sends the response. If you try to print the cookie value immediately after setting it, you would get an error. To retrieve cookie data with PHP. Now that we have cookie values set, we can use them in our PHP code. The example code is taken from the viewSettings.php file script 9.2. It uses the cookie values from the previous customize.php script to create CSS that specifies the page's font size and font color. Look at the code on the slide. First we start a style HTML tag. Then we start the body style declaration. Then we use PHP code to set the body style properties and values. If the font size cookie is set, then add the font size value from the font size cookie. Otherwise, set the font size to medium. If the font color cookie is set, then add the color value from the font color cookie. Otherwise, set the color to 0. Then end the body style with a closing curly brace and end the HTML style tag. When the code runs, it should create a body style similar to the code example at the bottom of the slide. The actual values will change based on the values selected on the customize.php page and stored in the cookie. The image on the slide shows an example of how the page might look after using the cookie values to set the font size and color. Run the code to see how it works. View the source to see the body style that was created based on your selections. Adding parameters to a cookie. The setCookie function can take other parameters besides the name and value. The next parameter is the expiration. It's used to set the amount of time for the cookie to exist. Without specifying the expiration, the cookie will only exist for the browser session, which means as long as the browser stays open. As soon as the browser is closed, the cookies are deleted. For the cookie to exist beyond that, you set the expiration. The expiration is set based on a timestamp. Remember that a timestamp is the number of seconds since epoch. So to set the expiration, call the time function, which returns the current timestamp, and add the number of seconds that the cookie should exist. Look at the example on the slide. This is the name2 cookie that we created earlier, but this time it includes an expiration parameter. Let's say that you want the cookie to expire in 1 hour. We need to convert 1 hour to seconds. So 60 minutes times 60 seconds equals 3,600 seconds. Then in the expiration parameter, we calculate the expiration timestamp by calling the time function and adding the 3,600 seconds. This will set the cookie to expire in 1 hour from now. The path parameter is used to limit the cookie to a specific folder on the website. This could be useful when cookies are only valid for a particular portion of a website. The domain parameter is used to limit the cookie to a specific subdomain on the website. Leave this blank to make the cookie available to the entire website. The secure parameter specifies whether or not the cookie should be only transmitted over a secure HTTPS connection. A value of 1 indicates that a secure connection is required. A value of 0 indicates that a secure connection is not required. The HTTP only parameter specifies whether the cookie will be accessible only through HTTP. As an alternative, cookies could also be accessible by using JavaScript. To set a cookie's expiration date. The example code is taken from the customize.php file script 9.3. It includes an expiration date for the 2 cookies previously created. This will allow the cookies to exist after the user closes their web browser. Without the expiration date, the cookies would automatically be deleted when the users close their browser. Look at the set cookie code on the slide. It's basically the same as in the 9.1 script. The main difference is that the expiration date is set to expire in 10 million seconds. This is approximately 115 days. There's nothing special about 10 million seconds. It's just what the author chose for this example. You can choose any amount of time that you like. For example, if you want your cookie to last 30 days, then enter the number of seconds for 30 days. If you want your cookie to last 1 year, then enter the number of seconds for 1 year. Deleting a cookie. To delete a cookie before it expires, you have several options. You could set the cookie without a value, or you could set the cookie to a value of false, or you could set the cookie to expire at any time in the past. Any of these options will remove the cookie from the browser. One caveat when deleting cookies is that you must provide the same parameters as when the cookie was created. For example, if the cookie was created with the path or domain parameters, then the same path or domain parameters must be included when deleting the cookie. To delete a cookie, the example code is taken from the reset.php file script9.4. The values for the font size and font color cookies are set to empty, and the expiration is set to 600 seconds in the past. The cookies can be recreated by running the customize.php page again. What are sessions? A session is another way to store information that is accessible across multiple web pages. Session data is stored on the server. This is different than cookies that are stored on the client in the web browser. Sessions have several benefits over cookies. Because the data remains on the server, it is generally more secure. Sessions allow you to store more information than cookies. Sessions will work even if the user has cookies turned off, and sessions allow you to store more data types such as arrays and booleans. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for additional information. When you start a session in PHP, you're assigned a session ID. The session ID is the unique identifier for your session. The session information is stored in a text file on the server that's associated with the session ID. The way it works is PHP generates the session ID. The session ID is stored as a cookie in the browser. Remember that cookies are sent in the request to the PHP script, so every request from the browser will include the session ID. PHP looks up the session ID in the request to see if it has information for the session. Creating a session. Use the session start function to start a session. The session start function will check to see if a session has already been started. If so, it uses the same session. If not, it creates a new session. This is one of those functions that must be called before sending any output to the browser. Typically, it would be the first line in your script, right after the PHP start tag, as shown in the example on the slide. Look at the example code in the Start a PHP Session section at the link on the slide. You can see how the start session function is called, and that it's called at the very beginning of the script. Creating a new session means that PHP will generate the session ID and create the session ID cookie. Recall that cookies have a name and a value. The cookie name of the session ID is PHP SESSID. This also happens to be the session name. And the cookie value is the actual random session ID, like the one shown on the slide. Creating a new session also initializes the session array named $_session. This is where you store and access the session variables. For example, the code on the slide creates two session variables. The first one with the name of first name and the value of Sam, and the second one with the name of age and the value of 10. Look at the example code again at the link on the slide. You can see where the values of two session variables are being set. Fave color equals green and fave animal equals cat. The session array is like any other associative array. You give the element a name and assign a value. The session array should always be treated as an associative array with strings as the keys, such as first name and age. To create a session, the example code is taken from the login.php file script9.6. It stores the email address and the time the user logged in as session variables. First, create a session using the session start function. This is required to use sessions. Then, store the email address entered on the login form in the session email session variable, and store the current time in the session logged in session variable. Then redirect the user to the welcome.php page and exit the login.php script. Accessing session variables. After you start a session and create session variables in the session array, you can access the session variables in the session array the same as accessing elements in any other array. Look at the example code in the Get PHP Session Variables Values section at the link on the slide. You see where the values of the two session variables are being printed. The value of the element in the session array is referenced by its name. You can also change the value of a session variable by giving it a new value. Scroll down to the example code in the Modify a PHP Section Variable section. You will see the session variable fave color is getting a new value of yellow. To access session variables, the example code is taken from the welcome.php file script 9.7. It accesses the session variables that were created previously on the login.php page. First, create a session using the session start function. Then, print the hello greeting using the session email session variable that was entered on the login form. Then, show how long the user has been logged in using the session logged in session variable that was created on the login form. Deleting a session. Even though a session will eventually expire on its own, there may be times when you want to end a session immediately. Deleting a session is a multi-step process. First, run the start session function. Next, clear the session array. You can use either syntax shown on the slide. Either set it equal to empty square brackets or by calling the array function without any parameters. Finally, call the session destroy function to remove the session data from the server. To delete a session, the example code is taken from the logout.php file script 9.8. It deletes the session variables that were created previously on the login.php page. First, create a session using the session start function. Then, clear the session array. Then, call the session destroy to remove the session data from the server.